Take a quick pause. Did you know that over 90% of you watching haven't hit the subscribe button yet? If you're enjoying this video, take a second to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us bring you more gripping stories every day. Also, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments so we can see how far our stories are reaching. Your support really keeps us going. Now, let's jump back into the video. His chest wasn't rising, no sound, no breath, nothing. I dropped to my knees in the sand, the sunlight burning down on my back as my hands trembled uncontrollably. Jordan's face was pale, his lips turning a sickly shade of blue, and for a split second the world around me stopped. Just silence, the kind that makes your stomach drop. I tilted his chin up, pushed air into his lungs. Inhale, exhale, compressions 1, 2, 3. Still nothing. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest. Sweat trickled down my temple, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Come on, I muttered, voice rough with panic. Don't you dare die on me, kid. Breathe, you little... I wanted to yell, to give up, to walk away. But I didn't. Because no matter what he did, no matter who he was to her, he was still just a kid. My son's best friend. A boy who should have been safe. And this wasn't how it was supposed to end. How did we even get here? That question haunted me as I pushed harder on his chest. Because this wasn't just about CPR anymore. It was about betrayal, about lies, about the kind of truth that rip apart the ground beneath you. And it all began weeks ago. I used to pride myself on being the kind of man who saw things clearly, a realist. Numbers made sense to me. Markets, investments, risk assessments. Those were my comfort zone. Emotion? Not so much. I was 57, had a long, successful career behind me and a peaceful retirement ahead, or so I thought. I built a life that was tidy, efficient. My home reflected that. Clean lines, minimalist design, everything in its place. Then there was Vivian, my wife of 23 years. She was everything I wasn't. Warm, magnetic, loud in the way that drew people in. Vivian didn't just walk into a room, she owned it. When she laughed, people looked. When she spoke, people listened. And me? I was always the guy in the corner, smiling politely, wondering how in the world I'd ended up lucky enough to marry someone like her. But lately, things had changed. That night, I woke up to the kind of silence that doesn't feel natural. You know the kind. I reached across the bed, hand brushing cold sheets. Empty. Vivian wasn't there. I sat up, blinked at the clock. Past midnight. The house was still, the kind of quiet that crawls under your skin. I pulled on a shirt and stepped into the hallway. Maybe she was watching TV, maybe she couldn't sleep. But as I passed the staircase, I heard it. A voice, low, playful, coming from the kitchen. I froze. Vivian's voice. Software. Careful. It was incredible. I want to do it again. The words stopped me cold. My heart dropped. 1,000 thoughts flashed through my mind in a single second, none of them good. You're so good, so hot. I stepped forward, quiet but purposeful. She didn't hear me approach. Who are you talking to? I said, my voice louder than I intended. Vivian jumped, spinning to face me, her phone still at her ear. For a split second, her face crumpled. Shock, guilt, panic. Then, just as quickly, she composed herself. She ended the call. Ethan, she said, sighing. You scared me. Who was that? Alicia, she said without missing a beat. We were talking about a guy we saw in a movie earlier. I stared at her. You said, you're so good, and I want to do it again. You sure that was about a movie? She laughed. Not the warm laugh I loved. This one was sharp, annoyed, dismissive. Oh my God, Ethan. Your hearing's been slipping for months. Are you seriously sure that's what you heard? I didn't answer. Look, she said, voice tinged with irritation now. I don't like you tailing me around the house like a jealous teenager. These dumb little accusations? Not cute. Maybe it's time you actually saw someone about your hearing, huh? She patted my chest like she was dealing with a child, then walked right past me. And just like that, I stood alone in the dark kitchen, her perfume still hanging in the air. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe it was just my imagination. playing tricks on me the way it had started to with my dad near the end. But something inside me whispered that I wasn't wrong. The next morning, I couldn't let it go. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in one hand, phone records in the other. It started as a habit. I always checked the bills for errors, but this time, I was looking for something. I didn't even know what. And then I saw it. 50 calls, same number. All in the past month. That was more than I called my own son. Aiden walked into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Hey," I said, careful to keep my tone light. "You know this number?" He leaned in, squinting at the screen. "Yeah, that's Jordan's." My stomach turned. "Jordan?" I asked, voice too steady. "But you haven't been calling him that much, right?" He shook his head. "No, we've barely talked this month. He's been weird lately, distant." I nodded slowly. "Thanks." It wasn't Aiden, so who had been calling Jordan 50 times? I already knew. Vivian. She was out jogging by the time I finished piecing it together. When she came back, her face was flushed, her breathing heavy. "Good run?" I asked. "Uh-huh," she muttered, grabbing water. I kept my voice neutral. "I was checking the phone bill this morning." She didn't even flinch. "And?" "You called Jordan's number 50 times last month." That made her pause. She lowered the bottle. "What?" "50," I repeated. 50. "You sure you weren't trying to reach someone else?" She blinked, then let out a laugh. Dry, sharp. "Oh my God, Ethan. He's been asking for college advice. He's overwhelmed. I've been helping." "You've been helping?" "I'm a counselor," she snapped. "That's what I do. You really think I'd throw away our entire marriage over some teenager?" "I didn't say that." "But you're thinking it, aren't you?" She tossed the bottle into the sink. "You hear things that aren't there, now you're obsessing over phone calls. What's next? GPS trackers?" "I never said that." "You don't have to," she snapped, cutting me off. "It's all over your face." I felt the wall going up, brick by brick. She crossed her arms. "You need help, Ethan, real help. You're turning into your father." That hit me hard. Too hard. My father, the man who spent his last years staring at walls, convinced the shadows were speaking to him. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was losing it. But then again, that day Aiden invited Jordan over. They were in the garage working on his old bike. Aiden eventually got up, stretching. "I need a shower. Be right back." Jordan stayed behind. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. No music, no TV. Just silence. I walked upstairs, noticed the bathroom light glowing under the door. Shower running. "Aiden?" I called. No answer. I walked down the hall, stopped at Aiden's room, and that's when I saw them. Vivian, sitting on the bed. Jordan right beside her. Too close. Her legs tucked beneath her, his knee brushing hers. Their faces a little too flushed, her hair a little too messy. They froze when I opened the door. Vivian's head snapped toward me, eyes wide, then narrowed. "Jesus, Ethan," she said, voice sharp. "You scared me." Jordan looked anywhere but at me. Vivian stood, brushing off her shirt. "We were just talking." "Where's Aiden?" I asked. "In the shower," she said, too fast. I nodded, eyes flicking between them. My gut twisted. "This isn't what you think," she added. But I hadn't even said anything. Later that night, I told her, "I booked us a weekend at the lake. Just us and Aiden." She smiled. "That sounds perfect." It didn't, and deep down I knew this wasn't going to fix anything. But I had to try, for my son, for my family. Even if something inside me was already breaking. Even if the worst was yet to come. He didn't sleep that night. Even though the cabin was silent, the lake calm, and the sky outside scattered with stars, Ethan lay awake on the stiff mattress, staring at the wooden ceiling, the faint sound of frogs croaking in the distance only making the silence feel louder. Vivian slept beside him, or at least pretended to. She was turned away, her back a rigid line under the blanket, her breath slow and even. Ethan didn't trust it. He didn't trust anything anymore. That bikini hadn't been for him. He knew her too well to believe that lie. They hadn't been intimate in months, maybe longer. The excuses had started slowly: headaches, exhaustion, stress, but they grew into distance. A yawning emotional canyon between them that neither tried to cross anymore. But it wasn't just the bikini. It was the look Jordan gave her when he thought no one was watching. It was how her expression softened around him. Not maternal, not friendly. Something else entirely. He rolled over, trying not to let his thoughts spiral, but it was impossible. His son was asleep in the other cabin. Jordan had his own room next to Aiden's. He should have felt better knowing that, but instead, there was a dull ache in his chest, a feeling that something was still wrong. The next morning, he got up early before the sun had fully crested the tree line. The mist hung low over the lake, and the wooden deck outside the cabin was slick with dew. He brewed a pot of coffee and sat on the porch, watching the fog roll over the water, trying to steady his mind. Jordan came out of his cabin not long after, hoodie pulled over his head, earbuds in, stretching like he hadn't a care in the world. Ethan watched him from the corner of his eye. The boy was 17, maybe 18. Too young to know what he was doing. Old enough to ruin everything. Ethan didn't say anything at first. Jordan noticed him eventually and gave a lazy wave before heading down to the lake, skipping stones across the surface. By the time Vivian appeared, makeup-free and glowing from sleep, Ethan had already decided to act like, nothing had happened. At least not yet. He had to be smart about this. Calm, strategic. That was who he was, after all. Not some jealous fool, not his father. They spent the day hiking the trails that coiled around the lake. Aiden was in good spirits, snapping pictures, joking with Jordan. Vivian wore her usual sunny facade, arms brushing Jordan's a little too often. Ethan smiled when appropriate, but his eyes missed nothing. That evening, they sat around the fire pit roasting marshmallows. Jordan leaned in close to Vivian, saying something only she could hear. She laughed. Her hand grazed his thigh. It was a small touch, subtle, probably meaningless to anyone else. But not to Ethan. He gripped his drink tighter, fingers whitening around the can. "I'm going to bed," he said eventually, unable to stomach it anymore. "Already?" Vivian called. "It's not even 10. "I'm tired." She gave him a look, part concerned, part annoyed, but didn't press further. Ethan went inside and waited. 30 minutes passed, then 45. At 53 minutes, he moved silently through the cabin, careful not to make a sound on the old wooden floors. He opened the front door and stepped into the cool night air, barefoot. His heart pounded so hard it made his chest ache. He circled around the side of the cabin, through the trees, to the edge of the clearing where the fire pit flickered in the distance. Laughter floated through the trees, soft and intimate. He crouched behind the shrubs, staying low, staying quiet. Vivian and Jordan sat close together. Too close. Her legs were pulled up into the chair, her body leaned toward him, her head on his shoulder. Jordan's arm was around her waist. He whispered something into her ear, and then she kissed him. Ethan froze. It wasn't a peck. It wasn't a mistake. It was slow. Intentional. Her fingers tangled in his hoodie as they pulled closer, their bodies pressed together in a way that shattered every remaining doubt. His ears rang. He stumbled backward, the leaves rustling underfoot. He turned and walked quickly back to the cabin, swallowing hard against the bile rising in his throat. Inside, he sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. She was cheating on him. With a boy. With their son's best friend. It felt like something inside of him had been ripped open, something vital torn loose and left to bleed. But what destroyed him more than anything else was the realization that he wasn't angry. Not really, not in the way he thought he'd be. He was humiliated, ashamed, powerless. What had happened to him? To them? He didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, Vivian was cheerful. Too cheerful. She made breakfast, laughing with Aiden, complimenting Jordan's hair, his cooking, his everything. Ethan couldn't look at her. "We should go swimming," she announced brightly. "It's our last full day here." Jordan perked up. "Yeah, that sounds great." Aiden shrugged. "I'm down." Ethan stood rubbing the back of his neck. You guys go ahead. I've got some work calls I need to check. Vivian glanced at him. You're seriously going to work out here? He met her eyes. Yeah. She didn't argue, didn't protest. Ethan watched from the window as they made their way down to the lake. Vivian in that swimsuit. Jordan shirtless, laughing, splashing. He reached into his bag and pulled out the small audio recorder he used during investment calls, just in case, for accuracy. He hadn't used it in months. He checked the battery, then slipped it into his hoodie pocket and stepped out onto the path. Quiet as a ghost. He took the long route to the lake, circling through the woods and toward the backside of the boathouse, where he knew they liked to hang out after swimming. He tucked the recorder under a bench, hidden in a towel. Then he returned to the cabin, heart hammering. That night, while everyone was asleep, he retrieved it. He sat in the bathroom, door locked, headphones in, knees pulled to his chest as he listened. The file started with laughter, splashing, jokes. Then voices grew softer, closer. I wish we could stop hiding, Jordan whispered. I know, Vivian murmured, but we can't, not yet. You think he suspects anything? A pause, a breath. He always suspects, but he never does anything. That's the thing with Ethan. He's all control, no fire. Jordan laughed quietly. He's lucky he has you. No, she whispered. You're the lucky one. Ethan stopped the recording. His hands trembled. They had no guilt, no shame. They talked about him like he was nothing, a barrier, an obstacle to tiptoe around, a man reduced to a footnote in his own life. He stared at the pale blue bathroom wall, the sound of his own heartbeat louder than any noise in the cabin. And then, finally, he cried. Silent, hard tears, the kind he hadn't shed since his mother died. Not for her, not for Jordan, but for himself. Because everything he'd built, everything he thought he knew, had been a lie. But something inside him also changed that night. Something dark, cold, certain. He didn't know what he was going to do yet, but he knew this. They wouldn't get away with it. The sun rose slowly the next morning, casting a golden hue across the lake, painting everything in a deceptively peaceful light. Birds chirped in the trees, the wind was calm, and the surface of the water shimmered like glass. But none of it touched Ethan. He sat on the porch with a coffee cup in hand, staring into the distance. The others hadn't stirred yet. Vivian was still in bed. Aiden was likely asleep in the cabin next door. And Jordan. He had no idea where Jordan was. Maybe in the guest room, maybe outside. Maybe still dreaming of the woman he wasn't supposed to have. The recorder lay heavy in Ethan's pocket. Its contents burned into his memory. Her voice. Jordan's laugh. The betrayal between them, casual and shameless. He'd wanted to scream when he heard it, to storm out and confront them, to demand answers and watch their faces fall. But something held him back. Not fear, not confusion. Control. That was always his instinct. Pause, assess, move carefully. By the time Vivian emerged onto the porch, wrapped in a light robe and stretching as though nothing in the world could touch her, Ethan had already rehearsed the performance of his life. Morning, she said, brushing her hair back. Morning. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. He barely felt it. Sleep okay? Yeah, he lied. You? Like a rock. She smiled, then went inside to make breakfast. He stared after her. That smile, that lie. The same mouth that had whispered, I love you to another man just a day before. After breakfast, Aiden begged to go into town. There was a small tourist shop he'd wanted to visit before they left. Vivian and Jordan both volunteered to take him. Ethan declined. You sure? Vivian asked, tilting her head slightly. Yeah, Ethan replied. I've got to take care of a few things here. I'll be fine. She hesitated for half a second, just enough for guilt to flicker in her eyes. Then she nodded. All right, we won't be long. He watched them drive off, the SUV disappearing down the dirt road. Then he went inside and opened his laptop. He hadn't actually planned to work, but his hands moved anyway, opening spreadsheets and reports more out of habit than purpose. His mind wasn't on the numbers. It was on what he'd heard, what he'd seen. They thought he was weak, predictable, emotionless, but they didn't know what he was capable of when pushed. He spent the next hour walking through the cabin, checking every corner, every room. He didn't know what he was looking for exactly. Proof, maybe. A message. A mistake. Something to make it all real, as if the recording hadn't already done that. In the guest room, he found Jordan's duffel bag. It was unzipped, half open. A t-shirt lay crumpled on top. A phone charger dangled over the side. Ethan hesitated. Then he knelt and pushed the clothes aside. At the bottom, tucked between a hoodie and a deodorant stick, was a small folded piece of paper. He pulled it out and unfolded it slowly. It wasn't much, just a few lines in Vivian's handwriting. Can't stop thinking about you. Every night I wish it was you beside me. Please don't say anything. I'll figure it out. I promise. His stomach turned. There was no denying it anymore, no doubt. She wasn't just toying with temptation. She was planning to leave. Figure it out. That meant end things. With him. He stood there, motionless, staring at the note until he heard the sound of tires crunching gravel outside. He folded the note, tucked it back where he found it, and left the room. The door opened. Aiden came in first, followed by Jordan, carrying a paper bag. Vivian stepped in last, brushing wind-blown hair from her eyes, smiling like nothing in the world was broken. They made lunch. They sat together, talked, laughed. Ethan said little. He smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, but inside, he was somewhere else. When night fell, the group gathered one last time by the fire pit. Aiden roasted the last of the marshmallows, tired from the day. Jordan and Vivian sat across from Ethan, their chairs angled ever so slightly toward each other. He watched them. Carefully. Calmly. You two have gotten close this week, Ethan said suddenly. Jordan looked up, startled. Vivian froze, a marshmallow half toasted in her hand. What do you mean? She asked, trying to laugh. You've been spending a lot of time together. I notice things. Jordan glanced at Vivian, then back at Ethan. We're just talking. She's cool. Cool. Ethan repeated slowly, letting the word hang. Yeah, I guess she is. Vivian set her stick down. Ethan? He raised his hand. It's fine, you don't have to explain. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Aiden yawned loudly. I'm going to bed, he mumbled, standing. Want me to walk you? Jordan asked quickly, rising. No, I'm good, Aiden waved. Night. Once he disappeared into the cabin, an eerie silence fell over the fire pit. Vivian finally spoke. Whatever you think is happening, I know what's happening, Ethan interrupted. I know everything. Jordan shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, it's complicated. No, it's not. Ethan's voice was quiet, steady. You crossed a line. Both of you did. Vivian's face crumbled. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but it did. She stood, arms crossed, defensiveness rising in her voice. We didn't plan this. I didn't wake up one day and decide to fall for him. It just happened. And you were going to tell me? Ethan asked. She hesitated. Eventually. Right, he said, nodding slowly. Once you figured it out. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did. Jordan stayed silent, his jaw clenched. I trusted you, Ethan said, looking at him now. I let you into my house, around my son. I treated you like family. I'm sorry, Jordan said quietly. I didn't mean... But you did. You meant every word, every kiss, every lie. No one spoke after that. The fire crackled. The night air turned cold. Ethan turned and walked away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explode. He didn't need to. The truth had done enough damage. The next morning, they packed up. The car ride home was silent. Aiden listened to music with his headphones in. Jordan sat in the back, eyes fixed on the window. Vivian stared straight ahead, fingers twitching in her lap. Ethan drove. Calm, quiet, focused. He hadn't decided yet what he was going to do. Not completely, but he knew one thing with certainty: he'd never see them the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready to stop pretending everything was okay. A week after they returned home, Ethan filed for divorce. He didn't make a scene. He didn't yell or beg for answers. He simply handed Vivian the papers, looked her in the eye, and said, "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." Vivian cried, tried to apologize, but it was too late. The trust was shattered, and no apology could rebuild it. Jordan moved out of state soon after, unable to face the guilt. Or Ethan. Ethan focused on Aiden, on healing, on rebuilding the life they both deserved. Slowly the weight began to lift, and though the pain lingered, he found peace in the one truth he could hold on to. Some betrayals end stories, but they also begin new ones, stronger, wiser, free.